Excited for the Open Championship. Colin has a impressive background there. It's not a prison cell, so this is
Nothing
going to be
but
a
the
great show.
finest decor of the Action Network Bay Area.
We'll definitely be looking at those. Or if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Brian_Mears on Twitter. I will pull stuff from there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll hop in. Here we go. All right. Real quick, since I'm a company man, if you haven't seen all of our golf content, please go check it out. We have comprehensive stuff on so many golfers. Stories from Jason Sobel. He ranked his entire British Open field. We have stuff from guys like Josh Perry, who wrote a lot of great stuff this week. Talked about all sorts of different golfers. You can click into there. We have their odds, their British Open history, best odds value, best matchup value based on a model that Colin built, tee times, outlook, how they rank in specific metrics. So if you want to bet or play DFS for a player and you're wondering what their outlook is, that is definitely the place to do it. We have other really cool things. Colin built this model again for matchups. So I pulled all of the matchups from sportsbook.ag and I rated them with the value rating. So if you want to go do that, that is for pro subscribers. So I won't continue to give it away there, but just to tease that. All right, let's dive in. Pete, any sort of big things that has really changed for you as far as maybe the type of golfers you're looking at? I guess the big debate, and Jason Sobel wrote about this, which I thought was really smart, is guys, and I think there's even a question between all of the players on tour, to use the driver or not to use the driver. Some guys have said that you don't need to because it's so firm and fast that you can hit a 7-iron out there really far. But other guys like John Rahm has said that he's just going to use the driver to try to take those fairway bunkers out of play. Seems like we're getting some mixed reactions. What are your general thoughts on guys, types of players that you're focusing on? Has anything really changed since Monday for you?
I wouldn't say a ton's changed. The driver question specifically, I think I'm going to lean more towards the guys who are going to hit a lot of drivers, just because the fairway bunkers are going to be the most penal element to things tee to green. And the rough, from everything I've heard, is not as penal as it normally is. It's been very dry, and obviously the fairways are baked out, and the rough just isn't what it's been in the past. So, and that's the case, I think it's a great strategy just to smash it over the bunkers and end up where you end up versus trying to, basically hit these different clubs off the tee to avoid them. I definitely prefer guys with a lob wedge in their hand versus a 7-iron. And in addition to that, I think one thing that we can pay attention to that was a good tip from Trevor Immelman. You want guys that have smart caddies. There's a lot of strategy this week, especially trying to avoid those fairway bunkers. And the really smart guys, the guys who are really working hard, are going to have an advantage. So I think that you can eliminate some of the guys a little bit that have lesser caddies, and certainly you can look to guys who are going to attack this in the right way. But to your general question, I do think I prefer to go with guys who are going to hit driver just because of the way DraftKings scoring sets up. The most interesting data point I saw today is that Justin Rose is now the clear favorite in the field from a matchup perspective, -123 versus DJ. Colin, what are your thoughts on that?
I guess I don't really understand what people are seeing in Justin Rose. I mean, that kind of sounds weird coming from me, of all people, considering how high I've been in him all year. But there's no new information. I don't see why. But I mean, you can give him home continent advantage. It's something that I've looked into before that doesn't really show up like it does for other sports like tennis. But that's a tough one for me to figure out why the markets are so bullish on Rose all of a sudden. Over DJ, that's a surprise. I mean, I'd still probably take DJ versus Rose in a heads-up match. In fact, I know I did for the model that I put together this week. I think between that and Fleetwood, I think people if there's one thing that I've anecdotally noticed for the British Open is that people love to overvalue British golfers in the British Open. I think people are allured to the hometown favorite. This definitely happened with Fleetwood last year.
That's true as well. It seems like it is. People are really high on Fleetwood. I mean, we put out an article today. Jeff Sherman over at Westgate released some data on the most money and the most bets, and Fleetwood was the most public golfer, which is pretty interesting. I think a lot of that's from how well he played at the U.S. Open. But Pete, I'm not saying that Rose and Fleetwood can't play well at a course like Carnoustie, but some of these Euro guys are like particularly skilled at links golf courses, and I'm not sure like Rose and Fleetwood necessarily qualify for reasons that I think Sleaze, who unfortunately couldn't make it on the pod, has brought up. Fleetwood really makes up a lot of distance, or makes up a lot of ground with his driver because of how straight combined with how long he is. And I think Rose all around game, like he can obviously perform well here, but I don't think he's like getting an advantage from a links golf course, whereas some of these other Euro guys. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I do still think that the driver could be a weapon for some of these guys, especially when you can bomb it over the fairway bunkers. But it's not a course where you need to hit driver great. Like Shinnecock really put a premium on being able to hit your driver extremely well in a lot of the holes. So in that regard, I do get it. I just checked the line again. It's now Rose minus 107 and DJ minus 105. So clearly some money came in on DJ. The one theory I had on that specific matchup was the weather angle in the books pricing that in. But I still think I would take DJ, especially in neutral conditions, heads up over Justin Rose.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff that I think definitely deserves some conversation just looking through the markets. And that's some of the cut odds. Some of these guys really, really have strong cut odds. And given that, historically we've seen some pretty crazy stuff at the Open Championship, especially for cash games, I think it's really critical to look at that. Colin, I think you're playing more GPPs than anything. How much, obviously it's always important to get 6 of 6, but are you more willing to take, guys with lower ceilings but higher floors in this format?
In a top heavy payout, no. I mean, in a vacuum, I think like that's maybe fine for GPPs, kind of throw a bunch of darts and let things fall where they.
So like Charles Howell, you wouldn't use in the Millie Maker?
Probably not. Like honestly, I think I know I've talked before about like upside and is it real or is it not. I think there's like I don't know if upside is predictable, but I know that like negative upside is. And that like if there are people who just can't get there like over and over again, people see it. Like Keegan Bradley or like before this year Luke List, for guys who like otherwise you'd expect to be racking up top 25s, just don't do it like over their expectation. You can't have those guys. And so like while the cut odds are important, like I think you do need to balance that like against guys who just can't get into the top 25. If you see them just like over and over again that they can't make it, then I think that probably short circuits or trumps their cut making odds.
Pete, do you think the make miss cut odds are efficient? Colin had sent me his model earlier this week. We were using it for a lot of our content, and it seemed that the sports book, and maybe it's just they were really, really heavily juiced. I'm not sure what the reason was, but it seemed that sports books were way more confident in a player's ability to make a cut than Colin's model is. So maybe Colin, you want to speak to that too, but in general,
that's the juice.
It seemed even more than the juice though. It seems, or maybe those are just way more juiced than anything.
You have to look at the spreads too, and if you can bet both sides, that's the key. Yeah, it's interesting overall, kind of how this is going to play out. There are certain guys. You mentioned Howell as one of them. Someone like Kuchar is another really interesting one. Even though he came in second last year, it was right there to win the Open. Mm-hmm. His make cuts relative to all his other odds is really strong there. So it just depends. But yeah, Colin, what are your thoughts on why the model differs so much from the markets on the make cut stuff?
I'm probably a little bit more conservative on people making cuts or missing cuts. I think maybe you can say that in majors, I could like the model's probably underestimating some of the top guys to make the cuts, considering they optimize their schedule around the majors. But that gets into the question about, is there anything categorically different about the majors and is it predictable over the long term? which is a really noisy and fuzzy question. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bias towards people betting yes to make the cut in general, in the same way that if you add up all the NFL win totals every year, it is above the number of available wins in the NFL.
Right.
I think if there's a bias towards if people are going to make it, like people want to root for something than against something. So I think if you just added up the total implied probability of the total field, you're going to get more people like then can actually make the cut. So I don't mind being a little bit more conservative than the market and odds to make the cut.
Yeah, and if you follow, if I followed Colin's model at the U.S. Open during that carnage when Rahm and all these guys missed the cut, when his model told me that they were more likely than their odds to, I would have made a little more money. So we'll see. So speaking of carnage potential, I have the wind pulled up here. This is just the weather for Carnoustie. We can see the wind. It does look pretty calm starting tomorrow. Or overnight tonight, which will be tomorrow morning local time. And then it picks up a little in the afternoon. Pete, what are you seeing? What are you hearing as far as like a differential of tee times? How big of an angle are you playing this?
I don't think it's a huge angle, but I still prefer Thursday AM and especially the Friday late guys. I think the wind could drop, and the cool temperatures along with the rain, I think could be a disadvantage very early for these guys. So I still prefer Thursday AM, Friday afternoon guys, but I don't think it's like what we saw in 2016 where I literally faded the entire wave that had the bad tee times. Curious Colin's opinion.
No, I think as far as like wind goes, this looks pretty tame overall. I mean, it is Carnoustie. There is like its links is designed to have the wind play in general, but no, this is nothing like Shinnecock. I'm weighting the wind a lot less. I don't think there's a strong weather angle to be had here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing much here either. So maybe a slight preference, like Pete said, but it's not really something I'm going to be like really shifting things too much based on this.
What about the temperature and the moisture? That's, I think, another interesting angle. If it does rain on Friday morning and it's cooler on Friday morning, does that impact anything for you, Colin?
Maybe the greens will be able to hold a little bit more than they would have otherwise on a baked Thursday. And so if anything, you give the Friday AM guys maybe a little bit higher advantage just because like the greens can hold. But
wouldn't it hold in the afternoon after it rained too?
I mean, it depends on how windy it is and how fast the greens dry out. And that's kind of a question for Scottish greenskeeping strategy, which is noticeably different than it is here in the US. So that's definitely a sleeves question.
Pete, I mean, do you have an opinion on there? I would, from what I've looked, it doesn't seem like there's like a huge advantage for one player over another on Friday.
I still prefer the late Friday guys, just minorly, but I agree. It's pretty mild at best, and I wouldn't make many decisions based on that. So I'm content pretty much playing everyone. I do think there's probably a slight edge, but it's not enough where it's not. We've seen other situations, especially at the Open Championship, where there's been a massive weather angle, and I just don't think that's the case this week.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of questions. Pete, this seems to be like the question of the week is what to do with some of these injured guys, like Stenson, obviously with having to withdraw from the Scottish last week with this shoulder injury. He said that he's not 100%. Sobel wrote about that earlier this week. Obviously, if he's going to be healthy, he's a near perfect fit for a course like Carnoustie. Obviously has really good history winning an Open Championship already. Then we have a guy like Bryson who withdrew last week as well. Who knows whether that was serious or whether he was looking for an excuse to get over a little bit earlier. But that seems to be the question everyone wants to know is sort of how to treat those guys. So I'll kick to you. How are you treating some of these injured players?
Well, Bryson, I think, is a clear fade. It's a shoulder injury. His ownership's going to be really low, but I still just think it's a clear fade. Just too much to overcome, if he's not right, especially with the shoulder. That's just so impactful to your golf swing that I'm off of him. He'll probably be really low owned if you want to take a huge risk. We saw it pay off with Finau, who, after studying that injury, I just had to get him out. But Maybe there's an argument to be made for just the contrarian angle with Bryson, but to me, I'm not going to get cute, and I'm just going to fade him 100%. Stenson's by far the harder challenge. You look through the markets, he's still priced really strong relative to his DraftKings price, one of the best values overall. His game sets up perfectly. Saw some stuff on Twitter that he looks fine. So I'll probably still have some Stenson, but I definitely am a little queasy about him. Seems like he's a great play in like the high stakes tournaments and probably a fade in cash where otherwise if he was totally healthy, it'd be a lock in cash. Colin, what's your opinion? I think Stenson's the trickier one of the two.
Definitely.
Yeah, like he is the data on Stenson has been so sparse all year that it's extra tough to know what to do with him. I mean,
Colin,
normally he fits this perfectly.
Colin, would you say that if Stinson was healthy, he'd be easy, that he's like easily the best value play, him and Finau? Like just like equity per dollar?
Yeah, that's always been Stenson's calling card. Like definitely. Yeah.
So Stenson on the most, in my opinion, bookmaker does the best job with golf. Stenson's a favorite over Koepka. Stenson's a favorite over Spieth. I mean, he's right there as he's a favorite over Justin Thomas. I mean, his market odds are just so strong. That obviously these guys know about the injury and they're still fine placing him at that price. I mean, he's a pretty hefty favorite. He's minus 125 versus all the guys I just mentioned. And he's a minus 145 favorite over Alex Noren. So clearly the books aren't as concerned about Stenson, which I guess we shouldn't be that concerned if that's the case.
Yeah. I was expecting, Pete, maybe you were as well. I was expecting his odds to drop pretty sharply after the Scottish, like earlier this week, as we get news, especially after like, you know, a lot of this was in the public conversation. I mean, Sobel wrote a piece about it. So were you surprised that nothing dropped?
Yeah. I mean, especially after he said, quote unquote, I'm not 100%. So yeah.
Do you think it's related to Finau though? Like people are just so scared of, people are like, oh, I've got to short this guy or I got to fade this guy. And then it turns out
clearly not happening with the exception of maybe Rory. Rory's matchup odds are just ridiculous. He's a minus 144 favorite over Stenson. But yeah, you look through the markets, I mean, it's very clear that the books aren't concerned with his injury at all.
Yeah, so Colin, there's a bunch of guys that I think that we are a little bit lower on, notably like Rory and Spieth, Sergio Garcia. I do want our opinion on some of these guys, and particularly Sergio. Sobel, when he did his rankings, I'm sure you guys saw this. Let's see, where is it? Sobel's ranking the entire field. Colin, did you see this? Did you see his number one golfer?
Yeah, I mean it's number one, but like not an actual number one,
Sure.
and like it's a technicality.
Sure. And I get his point. I mean, the dude is a really, really awesome links player, but it seems like a lot of people that I'm seeing in the public are not really worried about guys like Sergio, Rory, Jordan Spieth, who are not playing well of late. And it seems that some of our analysts, and especially your data, is a little more worried. What are your thoughts on some of those underperforming players? What does the data say about raising your play in the majors? Probably it says that it's possible, but maybe not the smartest just to bet on a singular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I try to like, if someone has been playing bad, it is likely that they will continue to play bad just based on past results because they are kind of predictive of future results. So that's kind of like the super simple approach. In the case of Spieth, Rory, and Garcia, it's really simple. They missed a bunch of cuts and they haven't been playing well. And they're gonna get a knock against them. I know like if there's a reason why I think that maybe their prices or their odds could be a little bit higher. I think there's some household name recognition in there where people who don't follow golf year in, year out, like will just bet on like household names. Matchups are a little bit more confusing where like if you have like Rory as a favorite over Stenson in matchups, which I don't think he should be, you have to believe that guys will just turn it on for a major. And I know they try to, but like there's only so much you can do if you've been playing bad. So I tend to start with data as the baseline, and right now the baseline says they haven't been playing well. So I would need to hear a really good subjective argument for why a lot of that can get thrown out the window.
Mm-hmm. Pete, what are your thoughts on Sergio? Here's a guy that we really kind of brushed over a little bit on the podcast on Monday. So maybe we were wrong for doing that. I think Jason did lay out some good points, but have you come around any on him?
Yeah, I've come around a little bit on him. I guess the argument for him is that he's arguably the best Lynx player, out there. But
and he had this baby, right?
Yeah, I like that. I'm a sucker for the narrative, but yeah, I think at his price tag, the one nice thing from a DraftKings perspective is he might be low owned. I think that obviously there's been a little more hype on him recently. I saw some stuff on FanShare that he was starting to get some love. But in general, you look at this price range, I see a lot of guys that are going to be very heavily owned for sure, kind of in that same range. Koepka coming off the U.S. Open,
yep.
I think someone that people are going to want to click on. I think Tiger.
Yep.
Every single time people want to click on him. Paul Casey for sure. And even just right above him, someone like Fleetwood looks like uber chalk. So in that high 8s, low 9s range, you might get really good ownership on Sergio, which is compelling. But his play has been really bad until his last 2 starts. So I'm kind of unsure what to do. If you look in the markets, I mean, they're kind of pricing him where we talked about. I think he's certainly a fine play from an equity standpoint, but not a great play. He's a dog to someone like Francesco Molinari, who's cheaper. So
yep.
I wouldn't hate plugging him in, but I definitely think you're searching a little bit if you're playing him strictly on equity. I think the argument to play him would be more on ownership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Colin, speaking on ownership, getting some good questions here on that. So I have seen a lot of public support, and it seems like a lot of DFS players are going to be on guys that Pete just mentioned. So Fleetwood, I think, is going to be super popular. Brooks, Ricky is always a super popular guy as well. Tiger Woods, Paul Casey, Molinari. Molinari, especially just how well he's playing. So if the guys in the mid to low 9Ks and the mid to high 8Ks are all going to be the uber chalk, that means Stars and Scrubs is going to be the contrarian equity strategy that you could potentially use in a milli maker. So what are your thoughts on that? And does that make DJ more appealing, or do you think he'll still be popular? Maybe you go to like a Justin Thomas as a way to differentiate a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's where we left it on Monday, where Stars and Scrubs is going to probably be the lowest ownership strategy of everything there. And especially your ability to kind of fill in the scrubs with some pretty good value plays, especially if you're going off the reservation, maybe guys who've been playing well in the Euro Tour that no one has their eye on. I think that's the way to get your ownership down. So I think people will probably be a little bit less on DJ, definitely Justin Thomas, and I don't hate taking a flyer on either of those guys.
Get some good questions here. Here's one from Jamie. He says, thoughts on a guy like Jason Day. He's a high ball hitter, and wins are expected to be a little lower than maybe we thought. If the greens are nice and they get to hold, are you more interested in maybe Pete, are you more interested in high ball hitters, especially on Friday, if the greens are a little bit softer and they can stick them, than you were earlier in the week when we thought maybe low ball hitter that could not have to deal with the wind quite as much might be the way to go?
I guess you can make that argument. Jason Day, to me, I just worry about his tee to green game. He's been so erratic off the tee, and even his irons from a proximity standpoint haven't been great. The reason to take Day is you just hope he gets smoking hot with a putter. He's arguably the best putter on tour. But yeah, I'm hesitant on him. I know 8,800 seems like a really good price, but I like a lot of guys around him. We just talked about it. I didn't even mention him in that same breath as Sergio, even though he's another one to consider in that range. I wouldn't be shocked to see him low owned. So maybe like the Millionaire Maker top heavy contest, he makes a ton of sense. But yeah, just looking at his equity, especially when you start looking at his matchup odds and all that stuff, I mean, he just doesn't stand out. And there's good reason. His tee to green game just hasn't been that good. Colin, what are your thoughts on him?
I pretty much agree with, it's with all of it. I think 8,800 is intriguing. I would have had to pinch myself if I thought we'd get him at 8,800, maybe 18 months ago, where it seems like he's unstoppable. But There's just too much. I mean, every time that we think he's ready to return to form, maybe he has kind of like a decent enough result. Like there's just too many other question marks. So
Molinari in the same range is minus 155 first day, just as a point of reference.
okay, like I mean, yeah, it's not quite there enough. Like the data is just above all else, the data is just too sparse, and I think it's like that like the sparsity of data or the sparsity of results definitely works against him. And that like I don't think people are pricing that in properly.
That's fair. Speaking of 18 months ago, guys, that you would have been surprised to see them at their price. This is a guy we thought was going to get into maybe the upper echelon of golfers, but has since really, really struggled. 8,500 Hideki Matsuyama. Pete, you threw him out on the pod on Monday as an intriguing guy. Just looking at the studs, 8K and above, do you think that he's going to be the lowest owned player? That's what we have him in the models right now. And, even just purely from an equity standpoint, a million maker, that seems at least a little intriguing.
Who is this again? Sorry, I just missed that.
Hideki Matsuyama.
Yeah, the bot. I was higher on him earlier in the week than I am now, just looking at some of the market stuff. But yeah, he's fine at 8,500 from a contrarian standpoint. I definitely haven't seen a ton of buzz around him. Obviously, missing the cut at the Scottish is really disappointing. He was starting to play better before that, but just too erratic a play. The wrist injury clearly hurt him a lot for a while there and hasn't really found his A game. So again, this 8K and, basically like the high end of the mid tier is just so loaded with great options that I'm going to fade him from an equity standpoint, but I could see the argument to play him strictly based on him being a really contrarian play. I'm sure Colin likes some other guys more than Matsuyama, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see here. We can get to some more questions. Got an interesting question about. I think he might be one of my favorite plays, my favorite players on the week. I'm just not really sure what the buzz on him is, but I think like equity wise with his talent and how he's been playing, I think he's one of the better values in the field. Colin, where are you at on Beau Hossler, who wish we had Sleaze because he would be so excited to hear that. But where are you at on him?
Probably one of my favorite pure value plays for the week.
Same.
I like it'll probably come down to ownership, but I just don't. Especially if you're going stars and scrubs,
Do you think he'll be high?
Right up there at like. I mean, it's tough to find a better guy like at his price range.
Do you think he'll be highly owned?
I don't think
I don't think
know that it will. Like it'll come down to ownership. That's the only thing that would basically keep me off of him at this point. But I don't think it'll be all that highly owned, especially if people are going balanced. I'm sure I'll have a lot of Hossler this week for sure.
Yeah, he might be one of my higher leverage, higher owned guys in the field. Pete, are you on the Beau train with me and Colin? And obviously Sleaze is always on the Beau train, or are you a little more skeptical?
I'm on it. I'm fully on board with the Beau Hossler train. I think he makes a ton of sense. Trending in the right direction, uber talented young player, has performed really well in high pressure situations in the past. So no problem taking a lot of Hossler. He's a great price. And I think that he's one of the young studs that, probably doesn't have, or definitely doesn't have the same name recognition, to the casual fan, but he is trending hard within the DFS community. The only concern I have with him is he might not be that sneaky relative to what we're thinking, but I could be wrong on that. A lot of these players in this range, are hard to project in terms of ownership, just because we get, differing opinions amongst the touts. So Hossler I've seen touted a decent bit, but not a ton. But I do think that in general, his ownership's kind of, trending. So, I mean, yeah, you see that right there. Quicken Loans, Travelers, he's getting into that double digit ownership where you used to be able to just get him in the low, single digits all the time.
Yeah. To be fair, those are pretty weak fields. So
of course they are. But you look at the Byron Nelson, you look at the Texas Open again, weak fields, but the secret is out in terms of people knowing who he is in the DFS community. The casual fan definitely is not as aware of him though.
Yep. He's pretty damn good. Got a question specifically about this guy here from Andrew. He says Alex Noren has been getting a ton of hype this week. Steak or sizzle? Colin, I'll ask you. Another one of these Euro guys that we see every once in a while. Guys like him and Matthew Fitzpatrick are definitely getting a lot of buzz. They have really interesting odds in the betting market. He's been touted quite a bit. I think he's going to be pretty popular. What are your thoughts on him? Colin, did you hear me?
Uh-oh. Colin might have froze. I like Noren. I'll pick up for Colin.
Thanks.
I think he's a great play from an equity standpoint. The downside is the ownership. A lot of sharp people are really high on Noren. I think he sets up extremely well for this course, but the downside is he's going to be heavily owned. So depending on the format, I think he's a great play, and something like the Millionaire Maker, I think you can justify completely fading him.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Tiger, a lot of questions about Tiger. Anything has changed really for you, Pete, on your Tiger take? I think he sets up pretty well here with he may not have to go to driver quite as much if he doesn't want to. Again, that's sort of the debate. Rahm has said that he wants to go to driver. Other guys have said that you don't need to because of how firm and fast it is going to play. Maybe the rain changes that a little bit on the weekend, but I think you have a choice, which means that Tiger can sort of optimize his game. He's been trending up a little bit. So any new takes really since Monday, which is that he's pretty good play.
Yeah, he's a good play. I mean, Noren, we just talked about it's a minus 135 favorite versus him.
Yeah.
Tiger's right there with JT, pretty close. I think he's properly priced relative to everyone else. The most shocking matchup on Tiger is he's even money with Spieth, which is pretty interesting. So again, Spieth really from a market perspective looks like a total dog, and he'd be someone to take a flyer on potentially in the Millionaire Maker.
So how much do you think like the market correlates with like ownership?
I mean, historically it has a bit, but obviously in the Millionaire Maker for a major, you have a lot more public money coming in that just doesn't care. So Spieth can never be that low owned, but it wouldn't shock me. Where I do think he could be really low owned is something like the Thunderdome. I could see him being like 5%. His game is really struggling, but he's someone that I think you could get a low ownership. But going back to Tiger, he's someone I definitely don't want to see a driver in his hand. He just sprays it way too much. His weakness has totally been off the tee, and surprisingly, putting's been a big weakness for him for the last, month and a half, 2 months. But this is a really good spot for him, probably his best opportunity to win a major outside of Augusta. And I have no problem taking him. He's the most intriguing from an equity standpoint that he's been on DraftKings that I can remember. The Players' Championship, he was nice. Obviously had a good finish there, but this is a great spot to take Tiger if you're a Tiger fan. And obviously I'm rooting for him no matter what. He's the one golfer, if I don't have rooting interest in terms of financial incentive, I still go hard for Tiger just because it's great for golf and it's fun to watch Tiger do well.
There he is.
Right as I was all about to, well, no, I wasn't gonna shit on Alex Noren. I thought but the answer was I think it's a fine play. I think he's it's I don't know where we landed on it, but I think it's okay. It's fine. It's a good. I wouldn't have.
What about Tiger, buddy?
I mean, I've covered it to death. I don't think I'll ever pick Tiger in DFS just because I think he's priced right, but I think people will be on the hype train this week, and anytime he'll show a good result or raise his price, his ownership's going to go up. He's just never going to be under the radar. Ownership, especially in the Millie Maker, ownership is the number one factor, and he'll just never be in single digit ownership this year.
Yeah, it's like Ricky. It's we are almost portrayed as haters of Ricky, haters of Tiger, when in reality it has nothing to do with their play. It has to do with their play and upside relative to what their ownership is. And those public guys are just they're tough to take in a Millie Maker for sure. We got a good question here. What are your favorite ways to get from a roster construction standpoint, maybe some pivot areas? Colin, I'll kick to you. Obviously, stars and scrubs I think is a good way to do it. But what are your thoughts on some of these guys in the high 7K range that people are probably going to take the 9K and then load up on a Finau, a Patrick Cantlay, some of these guys. But, pivoting to maybe a Leishman or a Brandon Grace or an Ian Poulter, seems like that might give you some edge in the Millie Maker.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to have at least enough equity. I think the only guys that stand out with like even like halfway decent equity are probably Grace and Leishman. Like maybe throw Terrell Hatton in there as well. And it'll just depend entirely on who ends up with the lowest ownership. So, but like I don't know, like the rest of that price range though, like no one's equity is all that compelling to me. So like I would actually have a lot of trouble fitting in anybody from that range.
Yeah, what are your thoughts there, Pete? Particularly on Leishman. Sleaze makes fun of you for some of your man crushes on golfers, but I mean, Sleaze loves Leishman more than I think you love any other golfer.
Yeah, I like Leishman a lot this week. I know Sobel does as well. Low ball hitter at a perfect course, so I have no problem going to him. Guys, I have a lot of Leishman and Grace at this point, who I think are both intriguing options. Colin probably is the least high, I would guess, on Leishman and Grace relative to Sleaze, Sobel, and I, but still think
I think Colin likes Grace, at least from what I've seen of like.
Oh yeah, like Grace, I've always thought is like a.
So we're all aligned on Grace, and we're pretty aligned on Leishman. Is that fair to say, Colin?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two chalky answers, though. That's the problem.
You think Grace will be chalk?
Not as much as Leishman, but I still think he'll be chalk. Yeah.
Interesting.
I could be wrong on that one. I mean, again, there's a lot of guys in this range that I won't be shocked to see their ownership really high or surprisingly low. Those are the type of guys that are definitely going to be the hardest to kind of peg.
It's just hard.
Like Thunderdome.
Yeah, it's just hard to if you're really gonna go a lot of Casey Molinari, Stenson, Cantlay, Finau, those guys are right in the middle of them. It seems like it would be hard for Grace to really, really get high, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. Let's see here. Some more questions. Thoughts on Ryan Armour, Stuart Sink? Anyone have any strong thoughts on those guys?
I have 0% of both right now. So
I have 0%. I have 0% exposure and 0% thoughts in my head. I don't worry about missing anything there.
Yeah, so I guess maybe a better question, and that was from John, is Colin, what are you looking for from a 1%er Millie Maker dart?
I guess especially concurrent with the the baked out Carnoustie, if you could I'd be okay with taking a flyer on a bomber, or just maybe even a Euro who maybe plays a little bit more links regularly. I know I go back and forth on if that's provable with data or not, but there are some good sleeper names. I know we've talked about Ryan Fox a bunch, as far as the guy that jumps in everyone, but even other kind of no namers like Jorge Campillo, who's done I don't think he's even played in the States all this year. I think I'd be okay with just looking for familiarity on some level, and then kind of just hope that you get a random result. Last year it was Haotong Li, who plays mostly on Euro and ended up with a top 5 finish. You're going to have to nail one of those that no one else is doing in order to win the whole thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good point, Pete, is that in order to win the Millie Maker, you are going to have to nail the winner. And that's why you sort of play really high equity players, because those players give you the best chance for your dollar to win the entire tournament. But, a Haotong Li or Ryan Fox or whoever that sneaks into the top 5, I mean, that's just so much equity. So are you going to be building lineups trying to, hit gold with a 1 or 2%er or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, those are the guys that you need to just show up and get you top 5 or top 10 in terms of DraftKings scoring. They don't necessarily need to finish top 5. They just need a really good DraftKings week. So that could be throwing together some birdies, getting some lucky eagles. Hole in one can certainly skew things in a direction. Someone like Jimmy Walker for the U.S. Open, really played terrible the last day. And I can't remember where he finished, but it was pretty far down for people who made the cut. But his DK score was buoyed by making 2 eagles in 1 round. So, And obviously that's a little different just because the scoring was there just weren't that many birdies and eagles out there at Shinnecock. But I mean, that's the key to winning these millionaire makers. For the U.S. Open, we saw the chalkiest type of teams win that we've seen in a while in the majors. But in general, you need someone who's off the grid to come through for you. And it's oftentimes not the winner. I mean, sometimes it is, like with Danny Willett, but most of the time it's one of these high-end guys winning that is relatively high-owned.
Yeah, no, for sure. So would you agree with Colin that, if that's the type of guy you need that's going to put up a lot of DraftKings points, you might go for like just a cheap, underrated bomber like a Ryan Fox?
I love Ryan Fox, so that's a perfect type of guy for me. But yeah, that's why I like the bombers, and that's why I like the guys who are going to hit, especially in the millionaire maker. I like the guys who are going to hit a ton of drivers and hopefully see a lot of birdies.
Pete,
we know you want the guy who's making 6 birdies and 3 bogeys and another versus the guy who makes 12 pars.
Pete, you can see my screen right now, right?
Yeah.
Got an important question. What are your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah. I mean, that's Sleaze's guy. I have no opinion. So I wish Sleaze was here. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but Jazz is a guy for Sleaze. If you really want to take him, you can get him at like 550 to 1. Throw a couple bucks on that versus throwing him in a DFS lineup.
I think if DraftKings did like Scrabble scoring, then he'd be a lock. But other than that, I really don't have an opinion.
He is a lock. Sleaze just finds these guys from the bargain bin and then touts them so high. At least he didn't convert you this time. You were all in on the Dylan Meyer train.
Meyer's been incredible since he was a super sleazy pick, by the way.
Oh, I know. Yeah, he's been so good. You're right.
I know. Dylan Meyer's good. So is the Norman Young guy, but yeah, it's been tough. I mean, the sleazy super pick or whatever, the super sleazy pick has been a tough thing that week for that player.
I know. What we need to do is we need to bet them like the 2 or 3 weeks after, because again, they can't handle the pressure of it. They struggle, but then they come back with the talent, it's tough. I think we're winding down here a little bit. Going through here. Running through these questions. Do you guys have any thoughts, Colin? Pete, any last thoughts you guys want to give? I'm making sure I'm not missing any questions here.
No, I can't wait to see how to burn out. It'll be weird if Carnoustie is not like the penal Carnoustie of years before, and like people can actually overpower it. But like, I think it's.
I saw 12.5 under as the line earlier.
What?
There's the winning score. 12.5 under is the winning score. With juice on being under. So you had to lay a lot for 13 under or better winning it.
Interesting.
Yeah, which seems right. I mean, given what we've seen, I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to be super windy. The rough isn't that penal. All these guys have to do is just avoid these bunkers that are just a disaster. So that seems to me a good situation for these bombers and guys who make a ton of birdies. And set yourself up for guys who score well on DraftKings. That'd be my biggest advice at this point.
Yeah. Last question here, Pete. What is the optimal? What we know, Colin's not gonna ever watch golf. Since this tournament is going to start like 2 a.m. Eastern time. Maybe like midnight for you, and it's played overnight. Like, what is the optimal way to take in the British Open for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to watch tonight a decent bit as it gets going. It is tough when it's later hours. Fortunately, my member guest is this week, and we have a PM tee time tomorrow, so that's really nice. So I will be able to stay up, and then, yeah, the one nice thing, especially for Colin, is being on the West Coast. I mean, just late nights enjoying golf. That sounds pretty optimal to me. But yeah, we're going to have action on the member guest, and we'll have action amongst ourselves on DraftKings lineups too. So it should be a lot of fun.
The most ideal thing was, Colin, you know how this goes. I mean, Pete, yeah, all of us have been to Hawaii in like the last 2 years. I think we actually like just rotated like every 8 months for a while. We all took a trip to Hawaii. That's like the beautiful place to watch.
Yeah, that's the play. We actually talked about
100%.
that. We talked about that. Sleaze Sobel and I talked about that during our podcast. And we introed that before. We talked with Trevor Immelman, and 100%. We got to make that happen. We're just going to all go to Hawaii and live it up. That is absolutely the play. Might be hard to justify that as an expense, but we'll do our best, right, boys?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, you'd be starting at like 7 or 8 at night.
We just need to convince. Yeah, that's the dream, because then you play golf all day and then you watch the Open. That sounds pretty nice.
That's like the best weekend of all time. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we need to talk to the boys and see what we can make happen for next year. That sounds pretty great. All right, Colin, any last thoughts from you?
Nope. Maybe everyone set your lineups before tonight. Like I'll probably be tuning in as I'm going to bed.
Sounds great. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I guess we got a couple more hours here before lineups lock, so definitely good luck. If you tuned in a little bit late, this video will be up on YouTube. You can just replay it and catch the beginning if you want to. So good luck. Hope we see a Fantasy Labs Action Network user as the Millie Maker winner this week. So good luck, and we'll see you guys next week.
Look, guys,